Super important opportunity for you to do a check-in with yourself and make sure that you're grasping these concepts well enough to go tackle the problems in your thought primer. So get something to write with and something to write on, because we're going to evaluate 2 arguments. It's not going to take long, but it's a really important check-in for you. All right, the first argument is this. All bodybuilders are tan people. All tan people are beautiful people. Therefore, all bodybuilders are beautiful people. What you have to do is you have to determine the form of this argument. And once you have the form, look at your inventories, always beginning with the unconditionally valid inventory. Those argument forms are valid from the Boolean and Aristotelian standpoints. But if you don't find the argument form in the unconditionally valid inventory, then go to the Aristotelian conditionally valid inventory and see if it appears there. If it doesn't appear in either one of these, it's invalid, okay? So go ahead and pause your video, determine the form of this argument and whether or not it's valid, and then when you're ready to check your work, go ahead and restart your video. Alrighty. Did you say that this argument form is AAA in figure 4? Because if you did, you probably came to the conclusion this is an invalid argument because the mood AAA doesn't appear in the figure 4 column in either one of our inventories. And if it's not in one of these inventories, it is not a valid argument. But hopefully you didn't fall for my trick again. Remember, standard form categorical syllogisms have to be in standard form, right? That means we've got our 3 terms appearing 2 times each in the exact same way, each time referring to the same thing. But it also means that the major term of the argument, the predicate of our conclusion, appears somewhere in the first premise, and the minor term of the argument, the subject of the conclusion, appears here in the second premise. And that's not the case here. So we can't determine the argument's form when the premises are in the wrong order, because that's going to throw us off on the figure always. Well, not always. In half the time, that's going to throw the figure off of the argument. So what we want to do is we want to flip those premises. We're just going to reorder them so that the major term appears in the major premise and the minor term appears here in the minor premise. Okay, now we can see, oh yeah, this isn't figure 4, it's figure 1. Does AAA appear in the column of under figure 1 for either chart? Yuppers, it's right here. The argument form is actually called Barbara. I'm not going to go into that. But at any rate, it's an AAA in figure 1 is unconditionally valid from both the Boolean and the Aristotelian standpoints. All right, I'm going to give you one more challenge. It's a really important one that you take here. Here we have an argument. Quite a few people who like bacon are men. Some students like bacon. Therefore, some students are male. All right. This one's not in standard form in any way, shape, or form. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to translate the premise and conclusion statements into standard form categorical statements, and then you're going to have to make sure that you've got 3 terms that appear 2 times each in the exact same way both times, and that all of those terms are countable plural nouns or noun phrases, and you're going to want to make sure major premise, minor premise, conclusion. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video, take this last opportunity to practice and do a check-in with yourself, and when you're ready to check your work, go ahead and restart your video. All right, let's see what you got. I came up with this. Premise number 1, some men are bacon likers, or maybe you had people who like bacon. Anything along those lines. It just needs to be a countable noun phrase, noun or noun phrase in your predicate term. Premise number 2, some students are bacon likers. Therefore, some students are men. Okay? So we've got here an I premise, and an I conclusion, and we can see that our middle term, bacon likers, is over here at the end. It's in the predicate position of both premise statements. That tells us this argument is I, and figure 2. So let's look at our figure 2 column. Do we see I here? Nopers. Do we see I here? Nope. Okay, that tells us this argument is invalid. There's something interesting that this argument tells us. If we look at the both of these inventories, valid forms of argument, none of them have argument forms with 2 particular premises. Okay, there's no I, no I, anything along those lines. Every single valid form of argument has at least 1 universal premise. Okay, so just something to kind of make a mental note of. I wonder how you did on this. I bet you did great.